What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another week of the Nothing But Nugs podcast, part of the Elevated Pulse Sports family of podcasts by the fans, for the fans, diehards only. Last week, we recapped the Nuggets season pretty much in its entirety. We went through the 2025 offseason. We walked through each segment of the regular season, and then we talked about the postseason series yet again. We just had to relive the pain for back-to-back weeks. But now we're going to get into some player stuff. We're going to get into the personnel that contributed to the Nuggets' third seed finish in the regular season in 2026, and ultimately the team that came up short in the first round against their new playoff rival, or just rival in general, the Minnesota Timberwolves. We're going to be talking about the guards today, and with me talking about the guards, as per usual, will be Eric Schultz. How's it going, my friend?
I'm doing great. It's the Nuggets off season, so it's time for us to do what we do as fans, and that's overanalyze everything and and second guess every rotation move and everything else like that that the Nuggets went through over the last season. But I'm here for it, so I think it's the appropriate time to dive in.
Yeah, I mean, you can't be a diehard Nuggets fan or fan in general if you're not over here just overanalyzing everything that happened from last season, hoping that this offseason changes can be made so your team can continue to contribute. But We're going to start, like I said, with the guards. All right. And now the Nuggets had an interesting situation with the guards last season. Obviously, you had your all-star Jamal Murray. Obviously, you had Jalen Pickett, who was kind of the third string. Bruce Brown was re-signed in the offseason. Now, Bruce Brown is not a true point guard, but he was kind of re-signed and given that sort of role as the second guard off the bench. He was given a lot of ball handling opportunities as well in a lot of actions. And so we're going to, for the sake of just the depth chart, and filling out three guards to talk about, he's going to be the other point guard that we discuss in this podcast. We'll also give, I guess, an honorable mention to Tyus Jones. He didn't do very much during the regular season, didn't get very many opportunities. He was signed late, and he actually ended up getting some pretty significant minutes in the postseason, believe it or not. But we won't dive too deep into him for that reason. He wasn't really on this team for most of the year. But that said, how about we just dive right on into it? Let's start off with the man who's been known throughout the duration of his career, at least since year 3, or the first time the Nuggets made the postseason. There's a playoff riser, a guy who's okay in the regular season, but who this season came out and became an all-star for the first time in his career, Jamal Murray. So, Eric, what do you think, just thinking back about 2026, what do you think about Jamal Murray's overall performance this last season?
Yeah, I think if you start with just the regular season, playoff Jamal showed up from game 1. He clearly came in with a mission this season, and it was to be more of a leader, to be a guy that took a little bit more weight on his shoulders, so to say, to try and take a little bit more away from Jokic. And I think he accomplished that. I mean, he had a phenomenal season, regular season. He played 75 games, so relatively healthy for the most part, averaged over 25 points, over 7 assists a game. So, from a point guard standpoint, those are pretty darn good numbers. He shot just under 50% from the field. I think career high, maybe not career high, but 43.5% from 3. Which, if I'm not mistaken, he also broke the all-time single-season Nuggets record for most threes made in a season. So, I mean, look, when you look at everything from a body of work standpoint that he put together, I think he had a phenomenal regular season. It's just really hard to see the way it ended in the playoffs and not weigh everything on that. But look, I'm a huge Jamal Murray fan. He is one of my favorite Nuggets that I've had the opportunity to watch play, really from his the time he was drafted until where he's at today. I think he plays with heart. He plays with emotion. He's one of those guys who I like to cheer for. It makes it a lot easier to cheer for the Nuggets when they have guys that you like and you like to cheer for, and he's one of those guys. Sure, he makes mistakes. I think he'd probably be the first to admit that. But I mean, man, from an overall season, regular season perspective, I mean, he to me, he stepped up and really he did exactly what he kind of, I think came into the season hoping to do, and that was kind of elevate to take that next step. He's probably going to land somewhere, in the all NBA, maybe second or third team. Probably third team is going to be my guess. But we'll see when all the after the season awards come out where he lands. But I couldn't have been happier with the way that Jamal played in the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to reciprocate that also. If you take a look at his stats, honestly, what you notice is that he had career highs in literally everything besides offensive rebounds per game, turnovers per game, steals, and blocks per game. Literally everything else was a career high. And so with this, obviously came a few concerns, right? If you're going to give so much effort during the regular season, knowing, especially in the last few seasons, you've dealt with injuries, it was a very valid concern that he might not be at full strength come postseason time. But he actually remained really durable throughout the regular season as well. And so, I mean, 75 games played, it looks like he was really showing that he was elevating to a level and in the center sort of his prime that he'd never really demonstrated he could do before. But I mean, postseason came, they put Jaden McDaniels on him, and he was just worn down. Okay. Needless to say, that did not go well. He also averaged the most minutes per game, both in the regular season and during the postseason for the Denver Nuggets. So he was a guy who obviously was in the starting lineup, but who was in a lot of those sort of stagger rotations that the Nuggets used throughout the course of the season, postseason and regular season. If you take a look at his shot type distribution, 59% of his shots came from 2-point range. 41% came from 3-point range. The solid majority of his field goal attempts were pull-ups. Okay, less than 10 feet was the second greatest frequency of shot type that he took. Catch and shoot was third, and then he had a few others in there that were sprinkled in at 0.2% frequency. But I mean, overall, when you think of Jamal Murray's practical statistical contributions, Eric, is there anything in the general statistics that stands out to you for some specific reason, positive or otherwise?
The one thing that jumped out, it on paper it looks good. I mean, I think he shot 88% from the free throw line this season, which he's typically somewhere hovered around that 90% from the free throw line guy. But when you take more shots and you're obviously driving and you're going to get fouled more, there were just times throughout the season where I felt he left some points on the board, and they were kind of big points. It's tough. I know he's probably harder on himself than anybody else. Just kind of knowing that history of what he went through, as a kid with his dad raising him, talking about how, he'd have to shoot 500 free throws a day, and his dad wouldn't even, let him move on to different drills until he made, 250 of them in a row without hitting the rim, and some, just crazy things like that. So it kind of, stuck out to me when he missed a couple of big free throws in big time moments. So that was one thing I was a little, again, this is just being super nitpicky because I feel like he had a great season. The other thing was, as the season progressed and you could see, as we kind of got into that, March, April, certainly into the playoffs, you could really see the minutes had accumulated and started to take effect. I mean, he just wasn't as sharp. He wasn't as quick coming off of screens. And he is a point guard. He's who the Nuggets rely on to bring the ball up the court. And it really became a problem in the Minnesota series when they put Jaden McDaniels on him and he couldn't bring the ball up the court. He didn't have it in him anymore. So I don't know what the answer is for the Nuggets, because I think Jamal was probably in the best shape of his life to start the season, or at least, from a basketball perspective. He was healthy, relatively healthy throughout the majority of the season. So to me, those are things that you kind of look at and say, well, if that's what he gave us this year, I don't know how he's going to be better, from that perspective next year. So we've got to find somebody else internally that can help alleviate some of that pressure and take some of those, take the ball out of his hands, make it so he doesn't have to be the guy. The other thing for me that he plays a lot of the non-Jokic minutes, because if Jamal and Jokic are both off the court, the Nuggets offense it's pretty much non-existent for stretches. So I think he carries kind of a heavy load when Jokic is off the court, and sometimes he gets into that bad shot type of, any shot seems like a good shot, and sometimes it is with him. He's a phenomenal shooter, but other times, man, you kind of scratch your head and say, what the heck was that shot, man? We didn't need a three-pointer cranked up, at 15 seconds left on the shot clock. Let's come down and run some offense. So that's kind of my takeaways from Jamal. But again, that's being super nitpicky. I mean, I love the guy. I think that he had a phenomenal season.
Yeah. As far as his physical composition, this is something I kind of noticed even when I was watching and kind of reflecting on why he wasn't as efficient, it felt, when he needed to be in clutch situations this year as he had been in previous years. If you think back, obviously he had the ACL tear a few years ago, and that significantly limited his explosiveness. He's not been the same type of explosive athlete since. But during the championship run, he had a much smaller body frame, and so he still maintained his quickness, even though his vertical ability had been significantly limited. This last 2 or so years, it seems like he's put on a decent amount of weight. And obviously that has its benefits, right? Because you can be more physical in theory. But Jamal is a guy who did really kind of rely on both his speed and his sneaky athleticism getting up to succeed just in general, especially in the two-man game. And so that's something that I think kind of went under the radar, is the fact that Jamal has a different body shape in this current day and age, in this current point in the decade and his point in his career. He's obviously good. He had an all-star season with his current physical condition. But I mean, you kind of saw it in the postseason. It's not hard to deal with a bigger, stronger guard if you just put a more athletic wing on them. And so, I mean, from that perspective, it kind of felt like Jamal was really missing his speed. And you could kind of see that really exposed in the postseason when a guy who's bigger than him, who he in theory should be faster than and be able to get around, was just able to hang with him literally everywhere he went. And so, I mean, that's kind of a transition into the two-man game. And I wanted to ask you a question about that. How do you feel about the two-man game's performance this last season with Jamal and Joker? Obviously, that's been the staple of the Nuggets offense the last several years, 8+ years. Did you feel like that kind of did its job? Did you feel like Jamal did his job in that setup in 2026?
I think he started off, they started off with it pretty well. I think the injury to Jokic, kind of limited that a little bit. Look, their two-man game is really as good as it gets in the NBA. Us as Nuggets fans, we're kind of spoiled to be able to watch these guys night in and night out with how easy they make it look. But I do think that you kind of start to see, when a point guard starts to take on more of a shoot first type mentality, you start to see other pieces kind of, I don't want to say falter or fall by the wayside, but they weren't as sharp, I didn't feel, after Jokic came back from the injury. And that, I'm not blaming Jamal for that. That could be, on Joker as well. But I do think that some of that is just simply because he was looking more to shoot than he was looking to, run that two-man game. I feel like you nailed it. I love what you said about, his body composition. If you look back at the year they won the championship, his body is different. There's no doubt about it. I think he's put on some muscle, and that's because I think he knew that he was going to have to take on a little bit different role to try and alleviate some of that pressure that Joker feels all the time. To do that, I think he had to put on that muscle, to be able to take the physical pounding that they hand out in the NBA on a night in and night out basis. And so I think when you start to combine all of that stuff, yeah, you're going to see a little bit, of a slip when it comes to that two-man game. And look, here's the other part that we haven't even talked about. It's the NBA. These are the best basketball players in the world with the best coaching in the world. They're going to figure it out, or at least figure out a way to slow it down. So, I think it's kind of a combination of all of that. But look, when I look at that two-man game with him and Yoke, it's still, to me, it's top 2, top 3 in the entire NBA.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I completely agree. It's one of the best and most efficient duos and plays in the NBA for sure. The question is whether or not that is something that they feel they can build around into Joker's mid-30s and Jamal's early 30s, especially given that the style of this team is very offensive heavy and requires the guys to get involved. Right. Maybe you could make this happen a lot more effectively and a lot more sustainably into the postseason when Jamal and Joker had to do a lot of hard carrying because there was a lot less perceived depth around them. And the depth itself, in terms of quality, was a lot more defensive oriented. But with the team we currently have that's just so offensive heavy and relies on so many pieces to work together, it almost feels like the two-man game is kind of fading into the background in some sense, although it's still the center of this offense. And I think as long as Jamal and Joker are on this team, you have to make that the center of your offense just because of who those two guys are and the chemistry that they've had for like nearly a decade or maybe over a decade at this point in time. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves into 2027. But I mean, as far as Jamal Murray, in summary, do you think he met his expectations in 2026? And would you like him to be back on the team in 2027?
So I think Jamal met the expectations simply because how I'm measuring him is, look, we all were waiting for that year where Jamal stepped up and became an all-star, and he kind of took some of that pressure from Joker, and he did that this year. There's no question about it. Do I think that he faltered in the playoffs? I think he had a really bad playoff series, and I think, my hope is he's going to use that as kind of a spark to come back and be better than ever. Do I want to see him on the team in 27? Look, I'm not a general manager. I don't know all the deals that are potentially out there for him. But we talked about it maybe last podcast or the show before. Team chemistry is one of those things that it's a real thing that you cannot recreate in any other sense. And the the chemistry that Jamal and Joker have, that they've had, since day one, coming in and kind of being bench players together and growing up together in the NBA, and ultimately becoming one of the better two-man games in the entire league for a good stretch, 5 to 7 year stretch. That's not something that they're going to be able to easily replace if they go out and shop Murray. And I get it. Jamal's probably the most, attractive piece that they could move. I mean, Aaron Gordon's got questions because of injuries. Christian Brown's contract's going to be difficult to move. Cam, he could probably be moved, but is he going to get you back what Jamal would get back? I doubt it. So look, I don't think it hurts to kick the tires and to see what may be out there, but overall, I don't think the Nuggets are anywhere near being, a top half Western Conference team without Jamal Murray.
Yeah. So I'm right there with you. I actually think he exceeded expectations in 2026, just because overall I did not expect him to be the all-star caliber player that he was during the regular season. And quite honestly, Minnesota knew that Jamal was much better this year, and they believed that so much so that they decided to stick a 3-and-D wing on him, like a 3-and-D guy who's 6'9" on him the entire series. So, I mean, that would be a struggle for literally any guard in the league. Maybe save for someone who's super speedy, kind of like I mentioned earlier, maybe like a De'Aaron Fox. But I mean, overall, Jamal Murray had a fantastic season. I did not have him being an all-star. He was an all-star. And I mean, his postseason performance was disappointing. But I mean, what are you going to do when a team pivots to that kind of defensive strategy on you? Especially considering some of the areas that you were lacking consistent depth throughout the regular season and especially in the postseason. So that's completely understandable. As far as do I want him to stay on the team in 2027? We'll see. If I were to be getting back maybe someone like a Kevin Durant or a LeBron James or someone like that, I don't think I would make that type of trade. I just don't think it's necessarily worth it. I do want to see Jokic's prime maximized, but I mean, Jamal's still in the prime of his career. He, like you said, he has that chemistry. And so that continuity with this team is super, super important. I don't think I would just get rid of Jamal Murray for absolutely nobody. I think maybe if a Jaylen Brown became available in a legitimate way, that would be about the only guy I would try to work out a trade involving Jamal Murray for, just because he has presence on the offensive and defensive side of the ball and also has championship experience as well. So unless it's someone like a Jaylen Brown, I think I would like to see Jamal Murray return in 2027, but we'll see how all of that shakes out. I think it would be, obviously, like you said, with the contract situation, they're not going to be able to bring in another star unless they move some combination of Murray, Gordon, or Cam Johnson. Christian Brown is probably not going to be movable. There's no way anybody would take that. And the Nuggets don't have the draft capital to be able to justify saying to any team out there right now, hey, here's a guy who put up double digits in one game in a 6-game first round series who's now set to make an average of $25 million a year. I don't think that's going to be a trade anybody takes. So it'll be tough to get rid of anyone besides Jamal. Cam Johnson maybe has some value, but Jamal definitely has the most. And so I really wouldn't move on from him unless I got something of comparable value in terms of his current ability and his current age situation and the chemistry aspect as well, right? If you're going to sell the chemistry, you got to make sure you're getting someone legit in return. So, hey, we have some comments actually. Before we move on to Bruce Brown, we got some comments that we'll address. Main thing I see with Murray this year is when clutch time happens, Murray wasn't as good as he's been in previous years. However, he played great in the regular season, says Cap N 1835. What do you think about this, Eric?
I mean, I think that's pretty clear. Yeah, he wasn't as good in the postseason as he was in the regular season. But I mean, it's hard. It's in the NBA. It's really difficult to, and that's something that we've been on Jamal about for years, is consistency. Consistency in the NBA is what's going to separate guys who are your average everyday guy to your all-star type level guys. And unfortunately for Jamal, that consistency or inconsistency reared its ugly head in the playoffs. You know, he started out great. I think games 1 and 2, if I'm not mistaken, he scored over 30 or close to 30 in both of those games. And then as that series progressed, McDaniel's defense got tighter. It was just kind of like an anaconda, you know, wrapping around him, and he just wasn't able to get free and get loose. And I think that's, you saw that was Minnesota's game plan, and they just didn't let the Nuggets get into the flow of their offense, which we all know when the Nuggets offense is flowing, look, there's a reason why they were the number one offense in the entire NBA this year. It's because of that two-headed monster of Jokic and Jamal.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough to see Jamal gets so worn down like that by a guy who's just so much more athletic than him, a little bit younger than him too, because this is the first time that this has really happened at any point in his career. I mean, we've seen McDaniels like switch on to him during courses of previous seasons, the postseason series a few years ago, regular season games, etc. But for him to be on Jamal the literal entire game is just so tiring for Jamal. And so, I mean, he wasn't as good in clutch time just simply because he was worn out. He just was not locked in. He was clearly fatigued during the clutch stretches of this game, and I would be too. You know, if I was expecting Jaden McDaniels to be right out there on me every single time, and I have to fight around screens and know that I'm not fast enough to outdo this guy who's much bigger, much more athletic than me, that would wear me down too. And so, look, it's great that he had a 25 point per game regular season performance, literal career highs across the board, except in 4 statistical categories. But yeah, I mean, that's really the biggest difference between this season and previous seasons. He was just worn down by the workload and the matchup in that playoff series. Another comment from Cap'n. Do you all think Murray choked in the playoffs? Love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. I personally do think he did. Eric, what do you think?
We talked about it last week. I don't think it was just Jamal that choked in the playoffs. I think it was the entire roster. Look, it's really hard to blame one guy when you can look at the other starting guard on the team, and he, you know, in the closing game, would he score 3 points on? I think he was 0 of 4 shooting or something ridiculous like that. So it's hard to put just all the blame just onto Murray. I think the entire team choked. I don't necessarily think any one individual should be you know, the one that takes the whole blame. I guess, look, could you say in a way maybe he choked because he didn't have the same type of series as he maybe had during the regular season? Because I do think if you go back and look at the games that Jamal played against the T-Wolves in the regular season, I think his numbers were far better than what he showed in that playoff series, especially if you take out games 1 and 2. But look, again, I personally think that was just more of a structural failure than pinning the blame on just Murray.
Yeah, I mean, game 2 was okay, right? I'm looking at the box scores here. All right, he had 30 points, 11 of 25, 6 of 14 from 3, which is funny because he didn't even make 6 threes the rest of the playoff series.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he was literally a net minus in 4 of these games. So yeah, I'm gonna say that I think that Jamal choked this series. I think that that's a pretty clear observation. I mean, this is not the usual Jamal Murray postseason performance that we're used to seeing. This is not Jamal ascending to another level when the lights get brighter and the pressure gets tougher. That's very, very crystal clear. And so, again, it's a very tough decision, right, that you have to make if you're the front office this season, because he had an all-star year. He's at the peak of his value. But at the same time, the only reason, the main reason why he choked in the postseason is because of the specific team you played with the specific matchup that they presented for you. So if you played another team in that series, are we having the same conversation today about Jamal Murray that we are having right now? If you play a team that's smaller and can't afford to put a long defensive athletic wing on your all-star point guard, are we talking about Jamal Murray having a colossal playoff collapse, or are we talking about a Jamal Murray who is at a minimum putting up his regular season type of performance, if not better, because it's playoff time? I guess we'll never know. But I mean, tough decisions have to be made this offseason. And so, I mean, that it'll be very interesting to see what the front office does with all of that considered, regular season, postseason, and otherwise. Thank you for the comments.
Chris, I got a quick question for you. So I know you said Jaylen Brown is kind of, and I agree. I think it's got to be some sort of star level type of player, proven all-star. If we trade Jamal, that they've got to go out and get a name that I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on. It's not that I've heard this name floated out there. It's just kind of what I've been looking into, guys who I think might be able to fit that role for the Nuggets. And it really would be two guys, because just to make salaries work, you'd have to work this deal. But in Dallas, they have Kyrie Irving. I know he's coming back off of injury, and they have Najee Marshall, who's kind of that small forward role. What would your thoughts be on a package that would, maybe Murray, and I don't know if anybody else to make the salaries match has to go, but let's just say it's just Murray for Kyrie and Najee Marshall. I don't know that Dallas would do that even, but what's your thoughts?
That's very, very intriguing, my friend. Very intriguing. Well, so here's the thing, right? Kyrie Irving has not played basketball in a long time. The injury history is clearly there. And how old is he now? He's got to be like 33, 34, right?
That's part of the research I was looking at. You're exactly right on. Next year, he'll be 34.
Yeah. So there's a lot of unknown there. But if you were to tell me, hey, you get a full year of Kyrie Irving plays 70 games, he puts up mid-20s points per game. He figures out the pick and roll 2-man game with Nikola Jokic, and he's healthy going into the postseason, and he stays healthy throughout the postseason. I would probably do that. But the fact that that's such an unlikely situation is reason enough for me to say, no, I probably wouldn't do that. Now, you also get Najee Marshall back in that deal, right? I know Najee Marshall is probably decent for his size at defense. Is he going to be a consistent 3-and-D guy? Is that the assumption we'd be making there with Najee?
I think that's what the hope would be. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know that he would be able to fill that role. That's kind of where I'm, is he the right guy? I don't know if he is. And that's, I was just trying to look at places around the league where you could, potentially find some sort of fits. And Dallas was one of those places that I found where the salaries kind of fit. You'd never know what you might get with, potentially Kyrie coming back off an injury. And I think I was looking at kind of their future. They have some future picks as well that if they needed to sweeten the deal for the Nuggets, they might be able to throw in, I think it was like a 2031 or 2030 first round pick. It's not their own pick. I think it's from Orlando, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that'd be very, very interesting. Right. I mean, now another option there could be you make a trade like that, and then you go sign a healthy veteran backup guard as a sort of insurance policy when Kyrie Irving would be likely to get hurt during the course of the regular season. That might be the only way to justify fully that kind of deal, right? Because you get some veteran experience, you get an all-star who's a championship winner, and you get a solid 3-and-D wing. That is not a bad deal on paper. It's just that extra context that might make me ultimately say, no, probably not. But that's a very intriguing idea. We'll see what might go down with Kyrie this offseason. He'll probably stay in Dallas, I would assume. But yeah, it's very interesting. It's fun to think about at a bare minimum, so yep. Very fun stuff. All right. With that said, let's move on to Bruce Brown. So Bruce, obviously fan favorite. Last time he was in Denver, he was absolutely a fan favorite. He came to watch the team in the postseason last year, and I think he showed up at Ball Arena, and the crowd went crazy for him. He's wearing that little cowboy hat. Bruce is a massive fan favorite in Denver. Bringing him back was a very exciting transaction to hear of that offseason. But it was very clear that with the injuries he'd sustained over the last few seasons with a combination of New Orleans and Toronto and Indiana, maybe another team in there, that he just was not the same type of guy. The athleticism just wasn't there. The energy wasn't necessarily there. And the shot, really until the end of the season, wasn't there. And then it kind of disappeared in the postseason as well. So in thinking about Bruce Brown, what thoughts initially come to mind, Eric?
I think if you thought you were getting the Bruce Brown from the year after we won the championship, then you probably were let down. I agree with you 100%. You could tell those couple of years away, there were injuries that came into play. He's not the same guy that he was back then. He's a step I won't say a step slower, but that shot it didn't come back until essentially the end of the season. Now, let's look at some of the positives. Bruce Brown was a guy that they could count on every single night. He played in all 82 games. I think he's the only Nugget that was able to say that he was able to play in all 32 or 82 games. So, if you were looking at finding kind of a backup point guard who you can rely on, we hear it all the time. Your best ability is your availability. I don't know if it's your best ability, but certainly it's a needed ability is availability. That's for sure. He averaged just under 8 points a game. I think right around 4 rebounds per game. So he came in and I think he did what most people kind of thought he was going to be able to do. I feel like for a lot of fans were expecting the Bruce Brown from the championship year, and that's not who we got. That's not the same Bruce Brown that we got. So again, if that's who you were expecting, I can see where some people may say, well, he definitely did not meet my expectations.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully people weren't expecting that.
Yeah.
I think that we expected him to fit a little bit better into the offensive scheme, right? Maybe we expected him to execute the concepts a little bit slower and a little bit less athletically. But I mean, at times it kind of just felt like he was out there pretty much only for defense, because offensively it didn't really feel like he fit anywhere. They wanted him to handle the ball off the bench. He didn't do that incredibly well. And I mean, for a guy who's 6'4" it's 72% of his shots this season were 2-pointers, and 58% of them were in the paint. So it almost felt like you had an identity crisis with Bruce Brown this offseason, or this regular season and postseason. It's like, how exactly do we use this guy? He's not the athlete he once used to be. He's still not a ball handler. He's now shooting worse. He's really only out here for defense. But again, he's not as athletic as he once was, so he can't do that as well as he could the last time he was here. It just felt like while he was welcomed back with warm welcomes and wide open arms, it just felt like he never really fit anywhere consistently. And so, I mean, that's kind of like an offseason. If you were to think back, hindsight is 2020, obviously. But think back to the last offseason, you're like, well, I get you wanted the Bruce Brown reunion. Would you have been better off trying to make a move with that cap space that you freed up from the Michael Porter Jr. trade? Would you have been better off trying to retain someone like a Russell Westbrook, a veteran point guard who gave you that energy, who is athletic, who brings a heart to this team, who was also kind of a fan favorite, even though he could have been kind of hectic offensively at times and turned the ball over a decent amount? It almost felt like that would be one of the biggest. If I had to undo that, I probably would have undone that and re-signed Russell Westbrook type of decisions. But again, just talking about Bruce Brown fundamentally. All right, here's the stat line from 2026, the regular season. All right, he averaged 24 minutes per game, 8 points per game, 48% from the field, 39% from three, surprisingly enough. And I think a lot of that was towards the back end of the year, and also the fact that he didn't really shoot as many as he had the last time that he was here. 76% from the free throw line. All right, he gave you 4 rebounds. He gave you 2 assists in that period of time. A steal, not many blocks at all. He's not a blocks guy. But an overall negative with the plus minus. And so, I mean, talking about Bruce Brown's fit into these rotations that the Nuggets worked in 2026, what did you feel about his fit in those rotations? Do you feel kind of like I do with the fact that, it didn't really feel like he had a home anywhere, or do you have a slightly different take on that perspective?
No, I do feel essentially the same way you feel. I mean, there were times throughout the season where you just got the sense that he was kind of a guy who was out there just to be out there. Like you said, he was out there for defense mostly, and that you can't really have that with a point guard. You have to be able to kind of rely on him sometimes to be able to push the ball, to be able to hopefully create some fast breaks and things like that. And one of the things that look, there's probably no statistical data to back me up. I feel like this. It was my eyes that told me this, not stats on a stat sheet. Bruce Brown might have led the league in missed layups, and I'm saying that in jest, but it
Mhm.
just felt like that sometimes. Where, gosh, how many times did we see where Bruce Brown was, out on a fast break, and look, sometimes he finished, and that's great. That's what we expect. And for a guy that can dunk the ball, a lot of times I was just like, Bruce, just go up and dunk the ball, finish it, and he would lay it up, and a lot of times it just didn't go in. So, but I absolutely feel like sometimes Adelman was kind of scratching his head with where does he fit in the rotation, because it's hard if you want to have him and Jamal on the court at the same time, which ultimately they're going to have to do it at some periods, especially when Christian Brown went down with an ankle injury. I that's where it was like kind of, well, who brings the ball up, who, if Jamal is out there on the court with Bruce at the same time and Joker's not out there, where do they go? It just, sometimes the spacing didn't seem right. Sometimes Bruce looked a little bit lost out there. And look, he's an NBA veteran. He knows clearly how to play the game of basketball. He knows where to be. He knows the X's and O's. But for whatever reason, it just seemed like, there were spurts where he really got it, and there were other spurts where it was just like, man, what's he doing out there? I think the plus minus that you touched on, that's a really good indicator. I don't like plus minus all the time with everybody, but when you're talking about your backup point guard who you kind of rely on to how many minutes a game did he play? Roughly 24, 20, 23, 24 minutes a game.
Yeah.
When you're playing those kind of minutes, there's an expectation that comes along with that, where you should be able to, kind of lead the way for periods of the game. And I just don't feel like he ever really did that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was the only net negative of the guys who averaged over 15 minutes per game during the regular season. So, yeah, I mean, all that considered, it just kind of proves the point, right? He just never really felt like he fit anywhere on this team. And, there's not a massive difference between his 2022, 2023, and a 2025, 2026 shot selections. Ultimately speaking, he was still in 2023 a guy who took most of his shots inside the paint. But I think that's exactly where you're right. I think he made a significantly greater amount of shots at that point in time than he did recently. But again, it comes back to the fact that he's not the same guy he used to be, right? I mean, the Bruce of 2023 would go up on fast breaks and just throw it down over people. And that wasn't only good for scoring purposes practically, it was also just good for the momentum for the team. Big dunks are momentum swingers. And that's exactly what you need if you're going to effectively put teams away when you need to. And that definitely helps in big games as well. And so the Nuggets just didn't get that out of Bruce Brown in 2026. We're going to ask the same question we asked about Jamal Murray. Did Bruce Brown meet his expectations? And would you like to see him back on the team in 2027?
I'm going to say Bruce Brown did not meet his expectations. And I think that's simply because I was kind of hoping for a little bit more out of him. As far as about him being back on the team, look, team chemistry we know is a big thing, but I really feel like there's probably other pieces that they're going to have to go out and find. And if we're talking about a guy that's going to come and be on the team to essentially be a defender, you're going to have to find a lockdown defender that can guard more positions than what Bruce Brown can guard. Unfortunately, we've kind of shifted in the NBA to, that, I hate to say it, like that Peyton Watson type of build where, you're looking for bigger, longer, athletic type of guys that can really cover space and play multiple positions. And unfortunately, as much as I would love to have Bruce Brown as kind of that locker room guy. He's just not that guy anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to agree with you there too. I'm going to say that I think Bruce Brown did not meet expectations in 2026. Like I kind of said earlier, I kind of just felt like it would be a very similar type of Bruce Brown, but who was a little bit less athletic and a little bit less overall energetic, but who would still effectively operate within the scheme of the offense. And he couldn't really do that. He just never managed to be consistent enough offensively. And for a point guard, or a guy who's playing the point guard role right when he's on the court, you really do need a little bit more of that. I even remember back in 2023, he used to have that little floater that he would knock down regularly as a part of his 60% shooting percentage on shots inside of 10 feet. It was just a great little shot. I actually used to copy it at the gym when I was playing pickup basketball in college. And so I loved that shot a ton. It was great. He tried to take that shot more regularly as a part of his role as the backup point guard in certain pick and roll situations or even off the dribble. And he just could not knock it down. I think he shot 37% on those little pull-ups in 2023, and he shot 30% on those same type of shots in 2026. So not the same type of Bruce Brown, not the same athletic Bruce Brown. Do I want him back in 2027? I'm going to also have to say no. I don't think that he is what this current Nuggets team needs. I think the Minnesota series exposed the Nuggets' lack of athleticism, and Bruce Brown, although great for team chemistry, is probably not great for team chemistry out on the court, shall we say. So great guy. I think he served his purpose, part of the championship team. Would have been great to have retained him at that point in time. I thought it would have been cool at that point in time for him to kind of be worked into the franchise starting two-guard role. But again, you also had Christian Brown, who played well, so it's understandable that they weren't able to afford him, re-sign him at that point in time, and then kind of work him in once Kentavious Caldwell-Pope left. But oh, well, another sort of what could have been situation, right? As you just made that decision in 2023. But you pay the champions tax. Bruce got his payday, and we're happy that he was a contributor for this team while he was successfully so during the championship run. All right, our last point guard we're going to talk about today, Jalen Pickett, man. Now, Peyton Watson was obviously the largest surprise, I think we can agree, in terms of guys who just completely surprised us with their abilities to perform when they played in 2026, especially during the regular season. I think you got to put Jalen Pickett right up there at second on this list, don't you? I mean, Jalen Pickett, with all the injuries that happened this season, just got thrust into regular rotation minutes. He ended up averaging like 16 minutes per game, I think. I'll go back and check here in a second. But, I mean, he got thrown in as the starting point guard oftentimes for stretches during this season. And he performed really well for several weeks at a time even. What do you think? Just initial thoughts about Jalen Pickett in 2026.
Look, Pickett is a guy who I would have loved to have seen more of, to be quite honest with you. You were right. From what I see in my notes, he averaged about 16 minutes per game. But man, there are times where when you look at Adelman and the rotations, and I know we had talked about it during that Minnesota series, when you need, and I guess he kind of switched more to Tyus Jones, but when we were struggling as a team to find anybody to be able to bring the ball up the court outside of Jamal Murray, in my head, I kept thinking, well, I know he's not playoff tested, but could we at least see what Pickett can do? Because he's shown in stretches throughout the season that he's a good enough ball handler. And I mean, he knocked down some big shots. I would love to have seen him a little bit more steady in the rotation, to be quite frank. I think we've been waiting for him kind of to take that next step. And I don't know if it's just not the right place for him. I don't know if Adelman's system isn't the right system for him. I don't know what it is, but I feel like if he had a little bit more opportunity, he would be able to show that he is a guy that can come in and kind of, be that backup point guard when Jamal needs to come off the court.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the playoffs are concerned, I kind of agree with you. I did kind of at times maybe want just to give Pickett a chance, especially since you did need some ball handlers on the court, just with how fatigued Jamal Murray was getting in this series. But I mean, you think about Pickett's play style, right? He likes to do the whole back down thing. He's massive back to the basket guy. And I mean, that's fine, but I just, even though I wanted to see him, my brain told me that this is probably not the guy who's going to succeed against an athletic, quick Timberwolves team, right? Would he have been able to get around pick and rolls effectively? Would he have been able to initiate half court offense after he gets across the timeline? Those are the types of the questions that I had about him, which is why I wasn't terribly upset to see him not get more minutes in the postseason series against Minnesota. But as far as his regular season performance, I mean, solid overall. I mean, 5.2 points per game. He's not going to knock your socks off. 42% from the field, 39% from three is pretty darn impressive. Okay. I mean, about 2 attempts per game, but I mean, there were games where he would take a few more in terms of volume and he would still knock him down at a very similar clip. 79% from the free throw line. He'd go out there, he'll give you 2 rebounds a game, 2 assists, did not turn the ball over, didn't really do much defensively, didn't get many steals or many blocks, and was just barely a plus in the plus minus at 0.1. But yeah, Pickett, very interesting, very balanced player. That's the massive takeaway I had from him in terms of play style this season. He was super balanced. You see that in the shot selection too. 45% on 2-pointers, 55% on threes. He would do just about everything in terms of shot selection. 42% catch and shoot, 35% pull up, 24% less than 10 feet. Definitely more of a shooter. Obviously, the highlight of his season came against the 76ers in that very, very random game where the Knights literally had absolutely nobody and like all the third stringers got to start and he had 29 points. And so, I mean, very interesting player. How, if you were to think about the regular season now, less the postseason, how would you have liked to see him used specifically off the bench more if he were to have been used more?
I think it's a fair question, an interesting question, but I think you have to look at what was Bruce Brown giving you. Were there opportunities for Pickett to get minutes? That Bruce was playing in those kind of minutes where as I described earlier, where Bruce just kind of seemed like he was floating around out there, really not doing a whole lot. Let's maybe give an opportunity to a young guy to see what he can do. I think there was ample opportunity there because we had Christian Brown go down with the injury. Look, I'm not trying to put Pickett into that two guard role, but you could have put Jamal into the 2 spot and had Jalen bring the ball up and act more as your kind of quote unquote point guard, just for more manageable time, just to see what he can do. I do think, I love the 76ers game that I had that highlighted as well as kind of the bright spot for him. 38, 39% from behind the arc. Look, that's pretty good on limited shot attempts, I think. Coming from Penn State, I don't recall him, lighting the lamp at Penn State as this knockdown shooter. So that's clearly an area of his game that he's put a lot of work into. You're absolutely right. He is kind of that more physical, back down, big body type of, bully ball type of point guard. And, maybe that just isn't, it just doesn't fit the play style that Adelman is looking for. And so I can understand why it might be hard to try and find those types of minutes because he's not the most athletic. He's not going to, get a ton of steals and blocks and things like that. But, when something's not working, and I feel like there were periods of time throughout the season where Bruce Brown it wasn't cutting it. If something's not working, let's not just continue to do the same thing over and over because he's a veteran. Let's maybe look at something that we have on the bench and see if that can give us, something different. It worked with Spencer Jones. Spencer Jones didn't come into this season as, somebody who we thought we'd be able to lean on, and we all see what happened with Spencer Jones. So, maybe if he was given more opportunity, who knows what we would have been able to find.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation. But oh well, I mean, he was part of that draft class, that Calvin Booth draft class of drafting these older college players who theoretically could have come into playoff games and give you some minutes. I remember people saying that, and I was like, really, this guy Hunter Tyson, really, this guy Jalen Pickett in the playoffs? These guys, you think? Yeah, it was very confusing. But I mean, Jalen Pickett is here. We're going to ask the same question we've asked about Jamal and Bruce. Did he meet expectations in 2026? And do you want him back on the team in 2027? I believe he has a team option for 2027. So he still technically could be under contract. He's not officially a free agent. Yeah, what do you think? Expectations, and do you want him back or not?
As far as expectations go, it's tough to give a grade on somebody who played so few minutes. I would say, I guess he met expectations just simply because my expectations for him weren't high to begin with. I would have loved to have seen more from him. So I guess I hate to be this way, kind of wishy-washy, but if my overall view is, did our point guard position meet expectations? I would say Jamal met expectations, or maybe even exceeded, as you said. I don't think anybody else really, hit the expectation. So I guess if it falls into that category, my answer is no. Pickett didn't hit expectation. Do I want him back? I think you are right. I think he does have a team option. I don't necessarily need him back if he's just going to be a guy who Adelman, if the role isn't right, if it's not going to be the fit that the team needs, then let's roll with Tyus Jones. I think that was a pretty clear statement in the playoffs when you brought a guy in at the end of the season who barely got any playing time during the regular season. And then when it came to crunch time in the playoffs, that's who they turned to give playoff minutes to over the guy who's been with you for, a few years now. I think that kind of spoke volumes. So would I be shocked if they moved on? No.
Yeah, fair enough. I also would not be shocked if they moved on from him. Something interesting now that I just noticed. I was about to give him an exceeds expectations, but now looking at the last few seasons, his first 3 seasons in the NBA, I'm not necessarily sure he really did. It kind of felt like that. Maybe just because there were so many injuries and you just were so unsure if you would get just consistent production from the third string for massive swaths of the season. Maybe that's why it felt like he played so much better than he had in previous seasons. But if we compare 2026 and 2025, he played roughly the same number of games, 50 versus 49, 2026, 2025, respectively, for all of these. 16 minutes a game versus 14 minutes a game, 5.2 points per game versus 4.1 points per game, 42% from the field in 26, 43% from the field in 2025, 39% from 3 in 2026, 40% from 3 in 2025, 79% from the free throw line versus 75% in 2025, but he had a few more attempts per game. Assists pretty much even. He had a few more rebounds. That's really about it, but about the same number of turnovers, steals, blocks, personal fouls. This is pretty much the same Jalen Pickett from an output perspective that we saw in 2025. And so for that reason, I'm going to say he met expectations, which is that he would be a third string guy who could come in occasionally and play well occasionally, even though obviously he had really good occasions in 2026, which is not something that he had in 2025. So he met expectations for me. He's not terribly expensive. Is it worth bringing him back on a team option just for some point guard depth? Especially considering you don't have much cap space and you only have, 2 picks in the 2026 draft. I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't bring him back. But for whatever reason, maybe if you thought that could free up some space for you to go sign a veteran to a veteran minimum contract who'd be solid and better depth on the back end of this bench, that'd be about the only reason I would not re-sign Jalen Pickett. Otherwise, I would just bring him back for that final year and then let him walk assuming he doesn't turn into an absolute superstar in 2027. So yeah, those would be my thoughts about Jalen Pickett. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up today's episode?
No, I think that pretty much nails it. Again, just real quickly with Pickett, after listening to what you just said, after kind of breaking his last couple of seasons down, it sounds like he is what he is. I don't expect he's going to take some giant leap into becoming some superstar, some hidden guy that we've had on the bench. He is what he is. He's going to be a guy that gives you 15, 16 minutes. He might get you a couple points here or there. He might knock down a 3 in a game. Ultimately, that's who he is.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. Jalen Pickett is Jalen Pickett. Bruce Brown is Bruce Brown, and Jamal Murray is Jamal Murray. We'll find out what that looks like come off-season time when the decisions get made to try and catapult this team back into title contention. But, I mean, as far as today's episode, that was a great walkthrough. Thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure to have these discussions with you. And thank you to everyone who listened and to our one fellow follower who commented on our live stream today. We hope that you guys drop more comments in these comment sections, like these episodes, share these episodes. We're trying to build the #1 diehard Nuggets podcast in the entire world, effectively, I guess. So get that content out there. We're trying to provide some high quality stuff for you week in and week out. But we'll be right back with you here next week to be talking about the shooting guard core of the 2026 Denver Nuggets team in the exact same format. So join us right back here next Friday at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Till then, take care and peace out.